Scott, can you call the roll?
Oh, certainly. One moment, let me pull it up. Sorry. Okay, Beth Gibbons.
I'm here and I'm in, sorry, I'm Ypsilanti Township, Washtenaw County.
All righty, Brian Foley.
Here, City of Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County.
Okay, Isla Coltis.
Present and City of Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County.
Sally Lusk.
City of Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County.
Okay. And looks like is Corey.
Corey notified me that he wouldn't be here tonight.
Okay. All right, Christopher Jacobs is gone. Jennifer Simons.
She will be here, but she's not here at the moment.
Okay, and then of course Steve Wilcoxon.
Present, Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County.
Okay, and that's all who I have on the agenda. Did I miss anybody?
No, Rebecca's here. She was technically supposed to be in the attendees, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Summer as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so next time I join, it gave me the option, join as the panelist or join as or remain as an attendee. So next time, should I choose remain as an attendee?
For the committee meetings, yeah. For the
Okay.
public meetings, I think you'll be a panelist for that. So
From a process perspective, should I sign out and sign back in for records?
Here, I can just make you an attendee because I think I mistakenly promoted you to begin with. Let me see here.
congratulations on your promotion.
I've been demoted, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
All good.
It's so dark in this room. I have people, well, the agenda is fairly simple. There's 2 items, so I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Have a second.
I don't think I've seen the agenda, so I can't second it.
It should be. There was an email that got sent earlier today.
Where'd that come from?
It came from Scott.
From me, yeah.
Give you a couple minutes to get that, or Scott, I don't know if you have it up, share your screen, or
I can do that. Let's see.
I don't have an email from you, Scott.
Oh,
So I might not be on your email list.
I just replied to an earlier one, so maybe that's why. But here we are.
you are not on that email. No,
I apologize.
I'll forward it.
Yeah, that's why I texted you, Steve, because I wasn't sure that there
I'm
was
sorry.
a meeting tonight.
So really, the only 2 items on the agenda are the topics and details for the 2 meetings that are in the next consecutive weeks. So we have a motion for approval of the agenda.
Sure, I'll second it.
All right, thank you. This is a voice vote, right, Scott? Sure, why not?
Yeah.
It's a small group. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, then the ayes have it. I have not had a chance to look at the minutes either, so if you can take a minute to look at those. Agenda, and it's all straightforward. Summarizing there, we set the times and the dates, or the dates, but we hadn't set the time, so we had a vote on that. And then discussion about updates on collateral, and started in on this conversation about the content of these two meetings. So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I so move.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? All right. Moving along, this is a point for public comment. I see we have 3 people in the attendees. We have Maria, Michelle, and Rebecca. This is a time of 3 minutes for you to comment. It's not a time for a dialogue, but a time for you to give comments, and then we can address any of those issues as we go through the meeting. So if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand with that function in the at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is Rebecca Esselman here on River Watershed Council. I just wanted to let you all know that I plan to attend the public meetings on behalf of the Huron River Watershed Council, along with Dan Brown, who's the project lead on the technical side of the removal project. And, I'm looking forward to hearing what the constituents have to say and participate in any way that's useful.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. Let's see that we have Maria has her hand up as well.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Maria Goodrich. I just wanted to very briefly introduce myself. I'm an Ypsilanti resident and the chair of the restoration subcommittee. And so I'm very interested in hearing from the constituents that are on and will be interacting with this committee and how that can inform the restoration work. So I'll be here and at the future public meetings in a listening role.
Thank you, Maria. Michelle, would you like to make a comment? Okay, if not, at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Summer so we can get into the topics and the discussion about the 2 upcoming meetings.
Yep, I guess the one thing that we do need to talk about is just the virtual in-person conversation as well. So I don't know how, even when you want to talk about that before we get into.
Yeah, we can do that now.
Okay.
So given there were some conversations offline about having these be hybrid meetings. We had agreed to do this. We had set it up and voted on this last time, and we'll have to change that. So the conversations have been that with the numbers rising for COVID, and also with the technology of having a hybrid meeting leads to problems with complying with the Open Meetings Act in terms of having breakout groups and having 2 separate sets of people that the city clerk has told us that that would not be in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. And so we're respecting that judgment, and Summer and I have talked, and I've talked with Rebecca and about this as well. And so with that, I think we need to move back to having this as a virtual meeting. I went to an in-person meeting today, and it was very strange. It was the first meeting in City Hall that I've been to in 18 months. And you know, going to the opening for the Thompson block was also a bit strange. But so I think with the numbers rising and with the difficulties with the Open Meetings Act, we need to have a motion to change these to be virtual meetings. So if somebody could make that motion.
Sure. I'll move to change the public engagement meetings to a fully virtual format.
Second for that.
I will second that.
And I think we need to have a roll call for this.
Can we have some discussion?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
I understand about the necessity. I think that it will make it more difficult to get all of the comments in the prescribed time. So I don't know if we, at the same time, we want to say it can go past 9 o'clock or not. But I think it's more cumbersome to allow people, by the time you acknowledge them, they turn off the mute and do all of this. It's a slower process. So
It is. I agree.
Personally, I don't think that it should take a longer time to run this as a virtual meeting than an in-person meeting, but I wouldn't expect us to be using this kind of format that we use in formal public meetings. I have imagined that these are more of workshop and engagement kinds of activities. So I'm curious if there's other discussion that's happened about what the anticipated format is of these meetings, because I would hope that we would be able to give people quite a lot of autonomy in their, microphones and videos and everything, so that they were able to be fully engaged with one another and with the facilitators.
will there be great breakout groups or not?
Yeah, that's the part that was not compliant with the Open Meetings Act, having breakout groups. I know they do that for some meetings, but they're not city public meetings. And this is what we've gotten from the city clerk. So I think this will kind of dictate that we have a single group and an open discussion in that way. The way this has worked for like some of the developments for Water Street and for North Park have been that, there's presentation up front, there's all of that front end loading with information, and then it's one at a time, raising your hand, making comments. There can be, some discussion that way, but it really curtails the between participant conversations. And I'm not sure exactly how we can do that. Facilitate that. We can have open mics for a number of people, but I'm not sure how you do that in a webinar format. So
Does it have to be a webinar format? Is that a rule that's coming down from the clerk as well?
I think that's more a technological question. The only, and I'm not clear on what the differences are for the other types of meetings. This is pretty much the only Zoom meetings I've been outside of the city have been meetings where they could have breakout groups, and I've done that. And so I'm not sure what the other formats would be.
Well, those are Zoom meetings versus Zoom webinar. So we're running Zoom, the city runs Zoom webinar for its public meetings, but the alternative would be to do Zoom meetings, which creates the possibility for, interaction between participants, breakout rooms, lots of, the ability for people to change their name. So you could do like interactive activities that it has a chat, like the chat function missing here, I think is unfortunate.
If I could chime in from someone who sets up the meetings from a city standpoint. So going way back to the beginning, the city does webinar format because it enables you to have a little more control over the process. So you don't get Zoom bombed. That's why attendees, when they're let in, automatically they don't have camera capabilities to let somebody in. With that, you'd have to promote them to panelist each time. And, I can't speak to whether or not the webinar format would work better for what you're trying to do. I know we've done it for other public meetings where and it depends on your format, but the way we've done them for other informational meetings is there's a presentation, then people line up with their hands raised and they're allowed to ask a question, and then they have and then folks on the panel will answer the questions. I don't know if that's what you were envisioning for this. As far as a chat feature goes, I can enable that. It's not enabled at this time because I didn't want it, because the way it works is you go in the back end of your account and click enable, and I didn't want chats running on all of the meetings that I run, but I could do it right before the meetings that we have scheduled. We've already, publicized the link for the engagement workshops, and I don't think I can change from a webinar to a meeting and keep the same link. I think I would have to make something new. So then we'd have to adjust all of our imagery and update our website and everything accordingly, which we can do, but we would have to do that very soon because we're looking at doing some mailers this week and getting that out there.
Yeah, I mean, so to Beth's point, that was the question that I asked yesterday, Steve, with Christopher, understanding the setup. And my understanding was that because, and Beth, just, the Opens Meeting Act, obviously that law was written before COVID, right? So there's a lot of things in terms of restrictions of what can and can't be used, because that was the idea, was to use it in a meeting format in order to do, breakouts, and to your very point, but we're not able to do that. To enable the chat, we did talk about that. We just have to make sure that somebody is managing the chat box in terms of answering questions and being able to bring them to the table. But it seems like, based off of the conversation, a little bit of research as well, with other municipalities as well, that the meeting Zoom, if we're in this wouldn't be, these meetings are not, they're basically subjected to the Open Meetings Act. You don't have the type of autonomy if it was not, versus if it was in person. So to that point, that was a part of the reason as it relates to with the in-person component, was trying to engage and give people an opportunity to go into breakout groups. But I know there's a lot of concerns just because of the variant. We have some parents who kids are not vaccinated. They don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, so that's the reason in terms of the discussion on the table, that if the city has been activating other events virtually or meetings virtually, that's the reason why it's on the table today, as to how you all would like to proceed, because the really only way we would be able to do it that way is we would essentially have to, do breakout groups, but we also gotta, that would have to be in person. It wouldn't be able to be virtual. I bowled down that alley yesterday. So in terms of the interaction, the limitation of the webinar is putting people up to the panelists, just like it happened when Rebecca came in, and being able to have those conversations, but it will not be able to, so we can ask questions to prompt people to get them engaged, but the same thing, we're waiting for them to raise their hand to get promoted up. You don't, like, this is more of a meeting setup. That would be a better, you can read body language, you can kind of see what's what, but that webinar setup is my understanding of what it is. And like I said, municipalities are doing that. It's not just Ypsilanti, like that is applicable because of Open Meeting Act. Policy was not written, it was written before COVID. nothing is, there was a executive order that was put in temporary. So otherwise we would have to do it in person.
Steve, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Steve, you earlier commented about city council meetings that are being conducted virtually, that they could go on later than expected. And my major concern is that with a lot of residents living on the impoundment, they would all like to have an opportunity. And I think if we don't have to end it at 9 o'clock, then, I can support the motion, but I'm concerned if we have an absolute cutoff time.
Right, in council, that is taken care of by having a motion to extend. For public meetings of this nature, that typically is not the case. That would be up to this group to decide whether to extend this meeting, and would be by resolution during this meeting to do that.
Well, should I move to amend the motion so that with the notices that are going out, it would not specify an end time, or it would say open, or whatever?
I would prefer to have a specific end time. One note for this is that this is the initial meeting, and this is not the only meetings that are going to happen. And so public engagement will happen, over the next couple years. So this is the initiation of that, but this is not the last time people will have a chance to speak on these items. And I can appreciate that, there's, with this format, we typically limit those comments to 3 minutes. And I've seen, 2-hour meetings for the developments where a lot of people get to speak. Question of whether it's whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours. I mean, I think but I don't think I want to keep anybody past 10 o'clock in this case. But procedurally, what we have is we have a motion on the table, and we have discussion on that. So your question of whether that would take a motion, yes, it would take a motion, but we're in the middle of discussion on this motion. So we have to kind of resolve this first.
So I would move to amend that we publicize that it could go till 10 o'clock. Doesn't mean it has to. It can always end earlier.
So who made the original motion?
I made the motion to hold the public engagement meetings virtually.
Okay, so Sally is proposing a friendly amendment to your motion. You and the person that seconded it have the option to accept that.
So we're extending all public meetings. So we would then be hosting public meetings for the next 3 consecutive Wednesdays from 7 to 10 p.m.
They could last till 10 p.m. They wouldn't have to.
Right. And the next 2 Wednesdays are public meetings. There's another committee meeting after that, and then there's a public meeting the week after that. So it's 2 public meetings, a committee meeting, and then a public meeting again.
How much have these been publicized already with the current end time of 9 p.m.? Has there been any communication to the community so far with the end date or end time? I'm sorry.
So that's been published on the website.
Yeah.
Scott can speak to that, but
It's not on the calendar. It's not on the city calendar or events.
And it was publicized as being virtual and in person.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a correction anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I really see the value in saying it's going to last maybe till 10 p.m. My concern with that, I mean, if it goes beyond, it goes beyond. But my concern with that is actually discouraging people. They think they have to sit in, kind of this longer meeting that's really late at night. I mean, they can make a choice, if they want to stay past 9 or not. But I don't know. I don't really see the value in that.
I thought Steve was saying that it had to end at 9 if there wasn't a resolution to extend it.
Well, and we can make a resolution in the meeting itself. I mean, I don't think that's a big deal to do. That's what we do in council meetings all the time. So,
Okay,
Gray area here. Sorry, Sally. This is going to be a different meeting than a council meeting. So, I mean, that's,
I realize the Open Meetings Act is in effect, but I didn't know that there was a mechanism for resolutions for a focus group type meeting, so.
right.
Yeah.
And this kind of
I
depends on, sorry, go ahead, Beth.
No, I mean, I'm happy to take these conversations in whatever order as appropriate for the format that we're using for this meeting. But I have a lot of questions about the nature, like, I guess the format of those, of the public engagement meetings, and who, I guess, like, who would be in a position to pass a resolution at the meeting.
That's the thing, that there won't be resolutions at that meeting. That is it's set format for that. There will be presentations. We went through this a little bit last week. So it's not the usual order of business for that. So, but in the past, things have gone longer, and this really relies on the people that are there for the presentations and for Summer, who will be facilitating this. So this goes to her schedule and her ability to accommodate that.
Would it be helpful to just put, sorry to interject again, but to just put a start time and not put an end time? Because like most of our commission meetings, like they start at a certain time, tell people when they end, and then it just ends when it ends.
But we do have to vote, even like for the Sustainability Commission meeting, we have to vote to extend them. They have like I don't know who makes the rules, but I know if we decide we want to talk to each other about sustainability for more than 2 hours, we have to extend it.
Right.
Happens a surprising amount of time,
this
actually.
meeting will be very different than that. And so those kind of procedural things are not happening in this meeting, because for that, there has to be a quorum of people, that would be,
Yeah.
and it's not even clear to me how that would work, but with this public meeting, it wouldn't be that. So I think the way to resolve this is to set a time and either be flexible in terms of letting it go longer, or set a longer time and call that a hard stop.
The one thing that I was just gonna ask as well is, I don't know, and Scott, maybe this is a question for the clerk, but if these meetings are not, there's no decisions that are being made at these meetings per se, I'm assuming, right? Like this is just an engagement thought process. It seems like it would not fall under, I thought there would be some other things around the OMA to just ask that question, because it's not like these meetings, I understand from an OMA perspective, because decisions are being made, but that's the one thing as it relates to it. So even if we were to convert into a meeting, I know what you're saying, Scott, that we've already sent, the link has been published or whatever the case may be. But if we're able to do a pivot, of that, and so to Beth's point, I think, because I think also, the landowners conversation is a little bit different, right? Like it's not going to be as much of a facilitating engage, because they're basically coming to, it's a different conversation versus the other meetings, that even if we were to have the time to publish, if we ask the clerk in terms of the OMA, that maybe after, or just trying to, before we're able to then publish a new link for the recreation user, the town hall, that type of thing, because that is a little bit of a different facilitated conversation that Beth is saying versus the landowners. The facilitated conversation is a little bit different.
Okay.
And Beth, I don't know if that makes sense in the direction of trying to see if there's an additional question of just, one more try at it as it relates to no decision being made at the, there.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking, Summer. And I don't know, I refer to our clerk Andrew with all open meetings actions. So, but I do understand, because my gut instinct as well would be that if it's a non-decision meeting, I think for him, it depends on whether or not there's a quorum of the committee present, which there probably would be. And then I guess was the second part of your question that because the landowner format is going to be different than, a different type of engagement than the recreation and general public, that, if we do find out we can do meetings, maybe do those for the later ones, but do a webinar for this over one next week.
Yeah.
I can find out as soon as possible. And then that way we still have the same link. And if we do mailing, because I was hoping to mail out a flyer to the landowners tomorrow. So
got it.
Yeah.
So procedurally, one way we can do this is to have the motion state that the preferred outcome and a backup outcome depending on the determination of the clerk, which is a little cumbersome, but I think that's what we have, and it's unfortunate that we're working in gray area, because I'll just leave it at that.
Right, like I said, because the public is invited, it might be a different nuance and it's a moot point. I guess I'm just saying it just at least, to be able to track it down as an option. But because the public is invited, I think that's where it gets, but again.
Right. So currently we're at issue where we've moved to make these virtual. The webinar format seems to be, if I get your statements correct, Summer, the webinar format will work for this particular group for the first meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying in the sense of timing to pivot now, because they already have the information, it can absolutely work. You know what I mean? If we go to the point of, Sally's point of, hey, just making sure people have enough time to get their comments and everything else in, we accommodate that, then it will be able, to work. Versus when we're talking about the other sessions, those are more questions that we're asking in terms of like, it is a different engaging format versus. So yes, because of time, Scott wants to be able to send something out to the landowners. I know that Sally has already sent the correspondence to the landowners about stuff, and again, if like it may be all a moot point because of the public dynamic once you talk to the clerk, and we're just keeping it consistent anyway. But if not, we're able to pivot if we learn something different for the other sessions if we can.
So would you clarify the terminology for me? Webinar, people can submit chat comments, and it's not currently structured as a webinar, or what's?
Yeah, no, the webinar will be just like, so webinars, so like earlier when Rebecca made a comment and they brought her up for her to make a comment, they will still be able to do that with the landowners as well. And then we did talk about enabling the chat box in addition to that. Okay. So that would be both options of that. It would just be a matter of, monitoring the chat box, bringing the panelists up for them to be able to speak for the landowners. Now, if we have to stay with that same, that same routine because of the Open Meetings Act for the other sessions, it would be the same. The difference is that, when you're trying to ask, like, Beth, I know we talked about some of the questions of like, how do you see how do you see yourself using the river? You're waiting for someone to raise their hand to come up versus, and it just makes the interaction a little bit different, right? It's a little bit of a different kind of, conversation versus with the landowners. A lot of the things that have, clearly, we'll talk about that in a minute, even with you sending over, questions in advance or things in advance to talk about, these are things that we know that people are going to bring up. It's a different strategy of a conversation. So they will still be able to be elevated up as a panelist, ask questions. We'll enable the chat box for the landowners so that we're able to get that information. It's just going to be a lot harder, or not harder. It's just going to probably be a lot of dead silence on the other ones as we're trying to engage people as a webinar for the other sessions. So that's why I would like to see if there is a possibility to ask the question. If no decisions are being made on those last three, that would be the ideal scenario. I don't think it is going to break us on the first one with the landowners because it's a different kind of narrative of a conversation, is what I'm saying.
And Sally, I don't know if you were asking this, but and so you can stop me if you want to. There's two types of Zoom platform. One is webinar and one is meetings. And meetings is built to be a more highly interactive setting where everybody can be allowed to enter and have the same permissions to speak and to interact. It can be equally controlled by the moderator at point of entry, how much an individual is able to mute and unmute themselves, show video, not show video, all of that. But webinar is really designed to be it's designed for frontal presentations, that there's a group of people delivering information to an audience versus Zoom meeting, which is designed to convene and to have conversation. So we're running meetings in webinar format, which is not ideal to have collaborative space because it's a format which is specifically designed to have presenters and audiences, not interactive discussion.
And were you saying, Scott, that it's not possible to have the meetings format for next week? Thanks for clarifying, Beth. I needed that.
Yeah, no problem. No, it's okay. I think that for some of us who have, I've worked in Zoom for years now, and so this is more native, but it's all jargon if you don't have to do it every day, which.
Yeah, and it's not that if we find out we're allowed to do meetings, it's not that we couldn't do next week. It's just we've got a list and we were hoping to mail a direct letter to the landowners as soon as possible. So that way, we have direct contact with them and they know that this is coming up, and we want that link information to be correct. And I don't think it would be the same link if we changed from a webinar to a meeting. I don't think that's possible. At least
not possible. You can't keep the same link.
Yeah.
So how long would it take to create that new link for the meeting format?
Just as long as it takes to create a new meeting. It's just a matter of updating it across the website and the figuring out how to change the graphics that we have while Elise is out. And it wouldn't take terribly long. We just have to double check that it's everywhere that it needs to be, and we don't have conflicting links out there. So double check the public notices that we have and so on.
Yeah, so that would be if we can, that would be the preference if we can ask. I'm pretty sure that that because there is no deliberation of policy, right? I think that it might be, but if we could just, I know that that's something that the clerk has to verify, but if we can, if the committee is deciding that that we can go virtual because of, all the restrictions and things that are happening, I think that it's important to see if we can pivot. And then obviously, Sally, I know you've been sending stuff out to stakeholders, and if we need to say, hey, here's a new link, and then we post it through social, hey, here's a new link, then let's try to see if we could do it that way, if possible. That would be the ideal scenario, if possible.
So then for this, I mean, we're getting chewing up time here with this too. I didn't realize this was going to be that complicated, but what we can do is entertain a change to the motion, amendment to the motion to state that the preferred status is to have meeting format in Zoom, if possible. Can add in whatever time frame changes that need to happen, and then have the webinar be the backup, and have both of those things stated in the resolution. Then we can move on. Scott and I can check with the clerk tomorrow morning and make that so. Scott, I'm happy to help you, go through everything on the website and make sure that we've, found all the places for that to happen. And then we can get on with the discussion of the content at this point. So, so the resolution as it stands is just to make it virtual. There was it was moved and seconded. There was a friendly amendment made by Sally to lengthen the amount of time. I don't know if you were saying till 10 o'clock. I think 3 hours. Meetings past 10 o'clock really are not conducive to good conversation. So having sat in council until 1 o'clock in the morning, I can tell you that. But so if we can get that motion, taken care of at this point, then we can move on with
I'm
the.
happy to amend my motion to shift the public meetings to be a virtual format and extending the hours of the public engagement meetings to 10 p.m.
How about
And
adding to that, making it meeting format and if possible?
and hosting these. Okay. Then the motion is to host our public engagement meetings on a virtual Zoom meeting platform, if possible, and to take place from 7 to 10 p.m.
I have a second.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, then I think we'll need a roll call for that.
Okay. In here, Beth Gibbons,
Yes.
Brian Foley,
Yes.
Isla Coltis,
Yes.
Sally Lusk,
Yes.
Jennifer Simons.
Simmons, yes.
Oh, Simmons, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Steve Wilcoxon,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you.
Mhm.
Now we can get on. Thank you, Summer.
All right, so I'm just going to share my screen. So basically in terms of an agenda, we wanted just to in terms of these engagement sessions, to really just welcome and a purpose of the meeting, which will basically be somebody from the city of Ypsilanti in terms of that particular, we'll talk about who that's going to be in that space. A history of the project, again, we don't want to make the assumption that people have a history of the timeline and how we have gotten to this point as it relates to the project itself. I put down a project status tracker because one of the things is that we know that there has been some conversations and concerns from just different constituents to be able to at least identify some of those concerns that have been been mentioned, to say, hey, these are some ideas of what we're looking to do after these conversations, to do a project status tracker so that the community is able to say, yes, we do know what this looks like and understand what's going to take place moving forward. And then the engagement framework would basically be, myself trying to level set the conversation for everyone to understand where we are, right? So it was voted in order to remove the dam. But this process is what is needed to receive information in order to compile a report to give to the DNR in order to make those next steps, right? And so then the number 5 will be the conversation themselves. And so the flow of it is obviously going to be dictated if it's webinar, if it's more of a meeting setup, and then giving everyone the next steps. I am getting ready to share another part of my screen. So one of the things, and I know, you know, we want to be able to offer, because we're breaking these groups up into you know, to 3 focus groups. So one, it's the property landowners, that would be the first one. The second one would be the recreation users. And then we have the general for all residents and non-residents to be able to come to be a part of it. So again, the questions and some of the concerns of what that is, what that is going to be a little bit different. But I do want to share the screen. I know Sally sent over just a framework of an outline of the questions that have been and again, you know, I think we want to level set that these are not going to be able to, these answers to these questions are not going to be addressed, right, at the meeting on Wednesday. These questions will be able to, be addressed, that this is what is coming up for the community to be able to articulate, you know, their concerns from the removal. But on Wednesday, in each one of these sessions,
What'd you say?
we're not going to basically come to the table and say, hey,
I just did.
Here is the sediment report. Here is the, like, that is what we're looking to gather from these conversations on Wednesday.
I ain't had no time to.
Is to be able to bring that information, bring those questions, so that in the report, the community is saying, we need these particular questions to be addressed in order for, you know, the removal process of the dam takes place. Does that make sense for everybody as it relates to what this? So I don't want to level, you know, I want to manage the expectations of, you know, some of the questions and what that looks like. And so I know from a category perspective, the categories, you know, Sally, I know that there's going to be some fulfillment of those categories, but I want to make sure that we talk about these categories of the questions. So one of the questions are the concerns about the toxic sediments. And there's some sub to that, right? We know that people are going to want to understand more about what that is. But again, you know, we want to section these questions off specifically to these particular categories, so that those landowners can speak specifically to that. Like, we don't want people to just get up there and say, I have 9 things I want to go through. We want to be able to say, okay, we need to speak to topic number 1, which is the toxic sediment is one of those topics, right? The next one, and Sally, I just want to make sure that we're clear on, you know, what those different buckets are. So we want to prompt the community to ask about their concerns about the toxic sediment. The next one would be the concerns as it relates to the unique flora in terms of what is not found in the river. So again, in terms of the river, the property value of the home, if those that's living in, how does the property value and what does that look like, their concerns on that. The mud flats along the river. So that is another category for them to be able to speak to in terms of the questions. The erosion of the banks.
So do you have this list?
Yeah, where's the list?
Because we don't have the list.
Yeah,
We don't.
I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me share my screen.
All right, thanks.
Okay. So there's subtext of what, but again, this is not speaking to every home, every landowner. They need to be able to respond to it. So we're just going to ask the questions in buckets. We're not going to get into the details. And so people are able to then go into their concerns for each one of these buckets, right? So the toxic sediment, we talked about, you know, in terms of the severely reduced property value, the mud flats along the river, the erosion of the banks. And again, we're just doing the categories. We're not gonna break it. Like the community has to give us, because I appreciate Sally providing this information, but the individuals need to be able to speak to what those concerns are from a community perspective, so it is on the record. The erosion of the banks, but these are the categories that are important to them. In terms of the projection of the cost of removal, again, we're not coming with any answers on Wednesday. We are coming to basically talk about these are the buckets of concerns. And then looking at alternatives as it relates to potential for hydropower, ownership and taxation of exposed mud flats, and then the historical significance as it relates to just for those as Ypsi residents and those particular areas. So it's 10 buckets of areas, right? But also not ignoring that there may be landowners as well that are not in, that they may say that they're in support of the dam as well, to make sure that they have a platform to be able to speak to that, not just making an assumption of all of the complete opposition, but looking at both sides of it. But these would be the 10 buckets. Is there any feedback on those buckets of questions to prompt the information from the homeowners? Hearing nothing.
I definitely have comments for this, but I'd like other people to have that possibility. Beth seems to be in two places here. She's as a panelist and as an attendee. There we go.
Sorry, my computer camera doesn't work. And so I just logged in so that I could see the shared screen, not on my phone.
Got it. So comments on this bucket list from, can we have that shared again, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to put it at a glance real quick, because like I said, this was, hold on one second. So I'm going to give me a second and I will make this a little bit easier to read at a glance. All right, let's see. Okay, hold on. I gotta go back to share screen. Okay. And all right, there we go.
So this is a shorter.
Yeah, this is basically, these are the buckets, right? So all of those other sub bullets is just there, some of the concerns that have come up. But again, the goal of this is to be able to give the community the voice of what that is for their concerns, but these are the bucket areas.
Right, and I have issue with the way some of these things are labeled. I have clear. I don't want to see the word mudflats in any of our messaging on this. You know, that has been pervasive in some of the information that's put out there, and that's inflammatory, and it has been used in an inflammatory way. So if we're talking about restoration of the uncovered land,
okay.
Potential for hydropower is not up for discussion in this. This is about what we're doing moving forward to that conversation has already happened. And I know people want to bang that drum again, but that we've moved beyond that, and that's not within the scope of this meeting at all.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of negative wording in this, incorrect and inadequate rationale for removal of dam. I can appreciate that's what they think, but we can't have that. I mean, that's not something that I'm willing to state in that way in this context. You know, if what is.
I'm curious, like, how we imagine using this list of 10 buckets. And I think that I think it's a helpful list to have to lay out where the concerns are for the landowners on the impoundment. But I'm curious, Summer, what your thoughts are about the way that this list would inform the format and structure of the meeting itself.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is trying to categorize it versus having people to just list out. Like, that's where the comment section, especially if it was the webinar setup, then you're going to have people to continue to just go through each of them, versus if we're trying to highlight those buckets, they can speak specifically to that bucket, because these are the reoccurring topics that keep coming up. And we can, you know what I mean?
I'm really interested in how we find ways to run these meetings that is continuing to push against just a kind of stand up, complain, sit down, stand up, complain, sit down sort of public meeting format. And I know that that's hard to get to given the limitations that we're probably going to deal with, like with the Zoom webinar. But I wonder what your thoughts are of using, I wonder what your thoughts are about using a Jamboard even with this group, because you could get people on a Jamboard. You could have 10 topic areas. And I agree with Steve, like inadequate, inaccurate projections of costs, incorrect, inadequate. Like, so, it's like concern. What's a concern? Cost of removal is a concern. What's a concern? Like the removal, like the rationale for the removal. So like, what if we have 3 hours, right? And how much time do we want to spend being interactive, and how much time do we want to spend just talking at people? So I'm just like going to throw this. I don't know if this is appropriate right now or not. I guess I'm not sure how much of this is like already decided.
Yeah.
Agenda. You showed the agenda, but like.
Yeah, no, that's the point of this conversation, is to be able to flush that out. I mean, obviously, the word, I just always want to be true to what the community has asked for, is that nobody is saying that these are the listing of how it's going to be summarized. These are their main concerns, right, of buckets that we need to be able to, because these are the readdressing things, the reoccurring things that come up. Now, how we're able to make them as interactive, that's all flexible. I mean, we can do that sometimes with jam boards, and if you have people that are not necessarily used to that level of interaction digitally, making sure that we're mindful of the demographic that is. For you, to your point, you've been in Zoom for a minute, right? Before Zoom was popular and being more digital, that is not the norm for everybody. So I do want to be mindful when we say interaction, that everybody's not going to be able to activate those other tools to be as engaging. Hence the reason why, the website Zoom model would be, meeting would be different, will be better, because yeah. I just want to be mindful that we got to be mindful of everybody's use of the digital platforms that are out there.
Mm-hmm. So I guess then I would take a step back further and say, what's the point of the meeting? Is it to give people a place? Is it to give people a place to learn information and air their concerns? Or is it a place to hear people's concerns and begin imagining potential solutions? And can it be all of those things in one?
Because I mean, I think as it relates to the imagining the solutions, some of these are like legitimate data that need, like, you're not going to imagine, you know what I mean? Like a lot of this is more like documentation. And I know, you know, we, again, trying to get people to be visionary within the space, I would have to yield to, you know, to y'all thoughts of how we're going to be able to pivot to that when this is there. Because the goal of this is to get information back from the community that is a concern in order to move forward with the removal of the dam.
Mhm.
And these are their concerns as their constituency group of removing to even get to the point of how do we find a solution? A solution is, you know, the data in order to be able to remove the dam. That these are things that would need to be addressed.
Right, but that's not the only purpose of this meeting. It's not just hearing those concerns. I mean, there's, you know, the whole point of the visioning part of this, and I think to Beth's point of having engagement and discussions besides just having this be the laundry list.
No, I got it, but again, we have to, you know, we have to just find the best in terms of the limitation of what we're asking and what the constraints are with the platforms that we're using.
Mhm.
So we have to, I mean, you know, that is the tricky part with engagement virtually versus in person that makes, you know, so I understand.
Right. So adding to this, you could add categories in terms of, you know, defining your relationship with the river, and starting at a point that is certainly more philosophical, and getting people to think about, you know, the daily interactions. Yeah, we know they all own land on it, but how often do they interact? How, you know, do they get on the water? Do they use their waterfront for access? Do they just look at it? Are they birders? Are they fishers? You know, all those questions that will be used for the subsequent meetings are all relevant in this meeting too. And so limiting this conversation to this single dynamic, you know, that leaves so much out.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a mix of that for sure. And no one is saying to, you know, to leave that out. Is more is trying to, I mean, that would be incorporated into it, but I guess the main thing is trying to figure out, you know.
So I can imagine us taking this list and the long list, and I'm not sure who's presenting at the top of these, how that's gonna get divided up between city staff, if there's any conversation with any of the consultants who've been part of the, you know, who are working on the projects to come in and be available. But I think it'd be great for us to take this list, and where the questions are actually data questions, to say, like, you know, this is where there's a track to data. And that, I don't think, I'm totally ready to be wrong on this, but like, there's been a lot of presentations about the dam removal up until now. So I tend to be interested in, like, what's the new information that can be offered, and what is it that we can be sharing with this group that is going to really be addressing where their concerns are. So, like, as we imagine those upfront presentations, doing the same presentation that's been given before, you know, like, probably we need to do a refresh. Like, there needs to be, these are the questions, this is what we've heard. Here are things that you've addressed, that you brought up, that, like, we have clear data for, and we want to share that. And
yeah,
so,
so
like,
that was, so to your point, Beth, that was the point of, like, the project status tracker, right? Like, there's been things that have been communicated. So that goes back to the agenda. When I said, hey, in this particular group, we know that things have been addressed. What do we know that we have some answers for? Like, we can say, hey, this was been addressed, or this is where we are. So yes, that is the goal, because to that point, a lot of these things that are on this list would essentially be addressed in that front forward conversation about, this is what it was in the presentation. This is where we are. We said we were going to have this, but we're waiting for this information. that was that line item for the project status tracker, which would also be ongoing, which goes to Isla's point when she asked about the repository, right? Like, where can you go to say, hey, like almost like a project management spreadsheet that just says, does that make sense? So the idea is, in a perfect world, if we're able to address some of those things, a lot of these questions you're going to mitigate some of this feedback because you're addressing it in the beginning of the conversation.
What, if I might ask about how, because I think Steve was asking this about how these were phrased and the language being used in the list. Is this language directly coming from language used by those concerned? Because there definitely is like kind of a negative bent to it. And I worry, are we guiding the conversation in that way? Or is there a way to address the concerns from a neutral standpoint?
Yeah, no, we'll definitely, so again, these were the focus areas from the landowners, right? Like these are their concerns, and obviously these are things that would be brought up in terms of buckets. It would not be worded within this space, right? But this is legitimately these are the areas. That's what we talked about in the last meeting. Bring to the table, what are some of the areas that you would like to talk about? And that's what Sally and the constituents did. Like, these are the things of areas of focus that we would like to address. And again, hopefully we're able to address some of these things as a status and a status tracker, that you're not going to have somebody get up there to say, what about this, this, and this? Okay, toxic sediment, we address it in the you know what I mean? But I don't want to, I want to make sure I'm presenting what has been presented from that constituency group.
So I have a question, I guess. I'm kind of with Steve on some of the language, right? And so I think there's concerns, like, I think any of the groups have variations on the same concerns, so to speak. So we know that sediment has to get addressed, right? While one group might be, and we're all worried about, is any of it toxic and things like that. So, I mean, for me, like, an area to address, and that's a concern, would just be calling this sediment removal or sediment mitigation, whatever you want to call it, versus like toxic sediment. I guess, I'm looking at some of this, like ownership and taxation of, to me, it's exposed land, not exposed mudflats. And the rationale for dam removal, like, incorrect and inadequate. I mean, that's an opinion about it, right? But I guess everybody wants to understand and know what's the rationale for the dam removal. And so, I mean, I feel like, having it laid out a little bit more like that, versus, because, right, it just starts off, and I understand, right, this is basically the thoughts and feelings, but I think when we're going to have a meeting, like, what is kind of the point? And a lot of this is like, we have kind of gone over and talked about it and whatever. And so I guess, right, we're trying to give another opportunity for some input and feedback, but for some of it, like the ship has sailed a little bit, like the hydropower or whatever. But I would expect that maybe others would maybe be attending this meeting too, right? Not just like property owners. So I think it's important how we at least present it, and regardless of where, wherever the conversation goes, I guess it goes. But to me, it's kind of like this, it's like the same, if we present it like for the different groups, like with the same issues, like sediment, I guess, ownership and taxation of, exposed land. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know that it has to be that varied from group to group, so to speak, because each group is going to kind of have their own concerns within each one. And like, if we use the same framework, using the same language, again, the conversation will probably go in different directions based on who's the audience, but it's kind of like the same messaging, so to speak, at least from how we're presenting it.
Yep. Okay.
I have a question. The grant specified there would be the public engagement, and what was the expectation for that in the grant? Was that to allow people to express their concerns? What was the intention with Eagle including that in the grant proposal?
The proposal that we wrote to Eagle was to host workshop settings where we would have constituent groups that would convene and have an opportunity to share their concerns and also discuss ways that they could have their concerns mitigated, so that we were creating a list of actions which needed to be built in to future planning for the dam removal process.
But these are clearly the concerns that were expressed by the landowners on the impoundment. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the question that I have is how do we benefit from having this list to creating a meeting setting that can build from having this as a resource that we can go in with and have people coming with their concerns, but in order for there to be resolution to them, we need to be hearing what are ways that we can address and resolve some of these concerns.
Because otherwise we're spinning our wheels, right? I mean,
Well, I mean, I don't think it's spinning the wheels. I think having this list is excellent. I just think that like then we're not getting the most out of the opportunity that we have when people are convened together in, you know, in this constituent or in this affinity group as they are.
yeah.
Right, because if this was all there was to it, then, you know, then the list is there and that's it. But what do you do with it once you get there?
Yeah, I do think it'd be good to find out, and Sally, maybe you can answer this, whether or not this is a list that is a public resource that we could use as a public resource.
what do you mean, Beth? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm imagining that at some point we probably want to convene into a place. What are the concerns that the city has heard, and how are we thinking about them being addressed and responded to? And so it would end up with that list. Like having this typed up summary is really awesome. If it can be, I'm not really sure like what that product is, what the, you know, when we come out the other end of this engagement process, we want to be able to say these are concerns that have been heard and have been vetted and have come through this process. Can we use this typed list in that kind of reporting, or do we need to? Yeah, that's it. I guess like how much are you willing to kind of have this be part of a public record?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that is the ultimate goal, is that the information from the list and from the meeting would be a part of that public information, right? As it relates to the report as an output. So yeah, I mean, that is, you know, because it would just be like with every other, you know, every other constituency group in terms of having those concerns to be documented, but again, being able to have the information that is then reported out as well.
Because I'm imagining, and again, you can like snap me, like I'm imagining what are the things that the impoundment landowners on the impoundment need to know that their concerns are being heard, and that there is a concerted effort to address their data questions, to provide that in a transparent way. And probably some kind of, I'd imagine that like people want some assurance that like if there's a point where there is toxicity that is dangerous for health and well-being, that like the project will have a stop point, or if there's a point where this project becomes so entangled in expenses, there is a stop point, something like this. Like I know, you know, I'm just imagining like what could go into a meeting ahead of time so that people feel like their concerns are being are being considered. And so taking this kind of list and like the bigger list and creating a summary, like a meeting packet that says, these are some concerns like that we've heard in advance, that the engagement committee has heard in advance. And our presentation, like you're going to hear a presentation that's going to try to speak to these concerns. And then there are these concerns that we feel like we really need to have more engagement to understand what are potential interventions that you as a group can imagine. And that might be it. And that's it. Like, that's the meeting, right? There's like, we can't say like, we don't know. But when I just like, I want to make the most out of the resources that we have to come in and try to help people to all be in the same place. And, you know, I may be trying to avoid what is just like an inevitable experience, which is like, people just want to like have a chance to say what their concerns are again out loud. But I would just love us to be able to take some of this documentation and prepare a meeting packet for people to be in like a shared space of like, these are concerns, here's a presentation to address what we can. Now let's have a conversation to like further understand the concerns that are not already addressed through existing data or data that's being gathered, and what are the steps that need to happen in order to get the information that's still missing.
Beth, I think I like what you just said. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think, right, when I think about how do we make it productive, I mean, one thing is I think to clarify some things and so that we can understand maybe what are the issues we aren't aware of or the aspects of it, you know, that we don't know. Because I mean, I know for me, like, you know, there are probably stop points. I don't know exactly what those are, but I know that, you know, I don't want to commit unlimited city money and resources to dam removal. You know, at some point, right, there could be this point, you know, where it just doesn't make sense. But to me, there's, you know, that's stuff we evaluate along the way as we find out new information. And it's also really important for me that we do restore uncovered land, you know, that we don't just leave it so that it's, you know, invasives take over and is whatever. And that we do try to resolve or, you know, what happens with property values and whatnot. I mean, so, you know, again, I don't know that I have the answers for some of those, but I mean, I know that there are things I think about and I do have, you know, I guess care and concern and you want to evaluate along the way. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like what you just said, though. I think some of that makes just a lot of sense to me.
I think this comprehensive list evolved because the landowners have not felt they have been heard in terms of their concerns. There was some discussion at the time that the motion was passed by the city council, but not really addressing some of the points that the landowners had made at that meeting, and that was the only meeting and nothing since then. So I think the landowners feel they have not been heard.
Well, and I appreciate what you're saying, but I also think that I think unless we don't remove this dam, I think that there'll be people who will still think they haven't been heard to a certain extent. I mean, I think to me, how we've kind of presented this all along is like, this is the direction we want to go in based on the information we have. But again, along the way, we're gathering new information, more information so that we can continue to make the best possible decisions and also try to understand what the concerns are. So, you know, I don't feel like that this is a thing where we've said, come hell or high water, you know, it's coming out. I mean, that's the direction we want to head in based on the information we have today. That's what, you know, makes sense for a variety of reasons, but we're here with open ears trying to understand, you know. So that, I mean, that's how I feel about it. And I feel like, right, these are opportunities to hear other concerns. You know, I hear these concerns, you know, and right, we're working towards trying to answer them even more, but you know, right, somehow, you know, right, we have to kind of keep moving along and gathering information as we go. But there probably is going to be a parting of, you know, we're gonna have to agree to disagree or something, you know, again, if we continue down this path. I'm not sure, you know, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's a divisive issue, I guess, for some people, and I'm not sure we're ever going to bring them along in embracing this decision.
Okay, sorry, Steve.
I like, just one moment. I just want to interrupt here for procedural. It is now 5 minutes to 9. To continue this conversation, I'll need a motion to extend this meeting. Given that we're still on the first meeting and that we don't have another meeting of this committee before the recreation meeting, I'm going to suggest that we have a motion to extend at 10 o'clock and then set a time limit on this discussion to move forward so that we can also deal with the other things. So if somebody could move to extend the meeting.
Can I have a question, Steve, before we vote to extend it?
Sure.
Yeah. I have something to do at 9 o'clock. I have actually another meeting to go to at 9 o'clock.
Mhm.
If I leave the meeting, would that not continue for us to have quorum?
We still have quorum.
Okay, all right. I want to make
with
sure that, you
one
know,
person.
okay, that if by me leave, I'm not sure the procedural, you know what I'm saying? If I
Yep.
left the meeting, where we continue on. Okay, but I have another meeting at 9 o'clock. Apologize for that. Yeah,
That's right.
okay.
I need to also check and see if I can extend or not.
Okay. Well, why don't we let people figure that out? And Isla, go ahead with what you're going to say.
My question was very, very quick. I wanted to ask Sally, as a landowner on the impoundment, if you were to receive what Beth had suggested as a package saying, here are concerns we are aware of, we're going to try to address these, would that make you feel as if you have been heard?
I can't speak for all the landowners, of course. And I think it would depend on how that information was presented, where it was coming from, the perspective. For instance, I don't feel that I have ever really understood the rationale for the removal. But yet other people I have suggested in the meeting that that's obvious and well-founded. So I don't know. I think it's important that the landowners get an opportunity to share their concerns. And some of us has said, then if it ends up being essential for the city to remove the dam, even though we may not agree with it, then we are concerned that it's done properly, well, and all the bases are covered. So that I'm only sharing one of the comments from one of the landowners, and then my personal background, knowledge about it, etc. Is that helpful?
Yeah. I was just wondering if there was a concern of not being heard, if there was a summary of we have heard those concerns, so if that would change anything. But it sounds like there is still a desire to like have that opportunity to voice it.
And it would really depend on the statement about we've heard it and therefore or something, you know. So
okay.
Okay, do people have thank you for that. Do people have a handle on their availability to continue this meeting?
I can stay on until 9:30.
All right.
I can stay till 9:30.
All right, so can we have a motion to extend to 9:30?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I think this can be a voice vote, right, Scott? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, we'll continue on. This leaves us with the procedural question of how we address this list and the format of the discussion in the next meeting, and then also addressing the format for the second meeting the following week. That's I could see this taking up the next half hour of this conversation. And you know, unless we have, you know, we are, I know you people are filled up with meetings, and I appreciate that. You know, it is possible to have an emergency meeting somewhere in the middle of this, before the second public meeting, to determine that. So that's a question, you know, in the next half hour, how much can we accomplish here? You know, what do people need? Is there more to this discussion that will take more than, say, 10 minutes? As I see this, we've got an agenda and an outline for the meeting. For next Wednesday, we've got a list of concerns from the landowners. And you know, I haven't said this, but this is I generated a list to go through this. This is the same list. You know, we've previously met with landowners, and from those previous meetings, I came up with a list that is similar to this. I think it hits all of these points as well. I think to Beth's point about how we format this for the discussion, and coming to a point where this is moving forward with some concrete steps to give that validation that these concerns have been met, and with steps to reassure going forward. And this is you know, to Summer's point with project status tracker, you know, incorporating that in there. That can be that tool that will provide some of that validation as well. The other part of the validation is the upfront presentation. We know what these are, with information being presented at the beginning that can address some of these things as well, and in terms of outlining how these topics will be addressed in the studies that are underway at this point, and then coming up in the future. So those can be addressed in that way. Is there anything else in terms of the format of the discussion next Wednesday that people want to get to?
No. Okay.
Is that an accurate summary of where we are and where we can go with this? Crickets, yay, nay?
So we're able to, I guess, like I said, with the, you know, to Beth's point, when she's saying, is there, you know, to provide a packet or whatever, you know, the case may be of advance. I mean, that's the idea of the project status tracker, is to be able to outline what those concerns are and to be able to give a status of it. So to Sally's point, you know, a lot of the constituents felt like they haven't been heard. We're addressing that on the front end, right? So
Right.
then even as it relates to the next point in terms of the engagement framework, that is to basically level set, like, what is taking place. We're giving the history, and then we're trying to move forward. And what that is, that the community conversation is to give, you know, the point of, so like, you know, and I'll go to the next slide, but like, this is, you know, some of the questions that were just for the, you know, the recreation group, which can be very similar within this space, right? We do think that it's important in terms of just, why is this project important? That's all relative. That's a neutral question. For some people, it might not be important. For some people, they have a lot of concerns. You know, I think it's important. We talked about that in terms of historic reference, you know, just those that are from IPSI. There are certain parts that are very sentimental. And what is that? How do you currently use the park? You know, Beth, I know you've asked about, not the park, the river, not even the park, that's supposed to be the river. But even as it relates to how that is used, right? So what are some of the concerns about, removing the dam and the impact of aquatic fishing, bird watching, some of the wildlife that people have asked, how will removing the dam impact your use of the river? So that goes to the question of, for some people, they've asked about like kayaking, right? Or the platoons. If you have if the current flow is different, is that, do people feel that that's going to be impacted so that we're able to know what that is in order to, to address it? And then what is your vision of the river with the removal of the dam? So for some people, that might be, there have been conversations about what does that look like post removal, which I know that that's still being flushed out in terms of, what does that look like for the restorative committee, as well as funding of what the river and the Peninsula Park looks like holistically. But that was more of a lot of the questions for that particular focus group. But some of those questions could also be applied to the landowners as well. But again, even though I brought those up in terms of focus areas, that's the reason why I talked about that, trying to address it beforehand, so that hopefully when we get to the conversation, the community conversation, we've addressed a lot of the status of what those are, that we can get into more of the visionary of how the park, how the river is used and things of that nature.
So these are great questions. There was a survey put together by the city, and I think I sent the results of that to you, Summer. These are some of those questions. There were some other questions as well in terms of, frequency of use and things like that. But I think really these are great questions, and I think taking this to the visioning part is like, to some extent, looking at different projects where there are riverfront developments and restorations where pieces of infrastructure have been changed. The park can be designed, and not just in terms of, well, there's the land and we're going to put stuff on it, but in terms of what that interface between the land and water looks like. Some of these larger municipalities that have removed structures, and they've really redeveloped the entire interface. And so some of these things were industrial sites that then became recreational facilities, and they changed the intersection of the water and the land. So getting information, what is your vision of the river with the removal of the dam? I mean, the river and the park, in terms of what people want to see. I think that's the huge part, and that would take some time.
For whatever it's worth, I think that with the recreationist focus group, and also then with the general city of Ypsi residents focus group, being prepared to talk about the changes that will happen downstream from the dam will be important, because I think those questions come up a lot. How will the dam removal affect Riverside Park and Frog Island? And the answer is that it won't. But just being prepared to have those conversations again, so that they're thinking about, I think, that's what I hear a lot. And impoundment owners are concerned about the pond, but most other people are concerned about what happens to the way they interact with the river, which occurs downstream.
Right. So it's unfortunate that Corey isn't here, but one of the projections is that the fishing all through this section is going to improve. It will certainly improve it will change drastically and improve in the area that is now upstream of the dam, but even downstream from the dam, the fishing will change because of the spawning grounds that this will create. So that impact downstream will be, better fishing throughout the whole region. So.
Mhm.
So is there anything else that's, I mean, like I said, this is, I said it, labeled it as for the recreational users, but it would be the baseline for all of the general sessions, as well as, incorporating the conversation, with the landowners too. So I don't know if there's any other questions, feedback. And then two, to that point, Beth, with enabling the chat box, that could be a way to also have the interactive engage similar to other platforms such as, Jamboard, that type of thing as well. Just, we can use that as another way, since we're going to be able to enable the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anything else that's missing, concerns from the conversation, the data? I mean, we can't necessarily get in, to that point of the vision of the river and the park. I think that will probably take a lot of the time as well.
One thing, I've always characterized as the heritage, and when we talked about separating the dam from the building, this it's kind of addressed in the second point you got there, but I think to a greater extent, having a space for a conversation about how to preserve the heritage of the site, separate from the dam. Lots of people are talking about, the sign and in the building, and that was kind of where we got with the surveys and things, is that triggered a very emotional response, more so than the dam. It was more of the image of the building and the sign was important to people. So that encapsulates that pretty well.
Okay. Any other feedback? Is everybody aligned in a sense that these questions will be applicable to the other sessions as well?
So applicable to just to the city resident section.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is applicable to all, including the landowners.
And I think even as it relates to for the general and just trying to understand for those, I think another question potentially could be, if, for those that don't use it, right? That don't use the river or the park, what are ways that they would be engaged? You may have some people, we don't want to make the assumption in those other constituency groups, we know that this is specifically, but for those that may not, what is it that they would like to see in order to be engaged or interact with the river and the park? I don't know if that makes sense, but that also becomes more of the visionary when you think about ways to get people a little bit more engaged on nature and that type of thing too.
Precisely, new use of the park. I mean, and that's part of what the survey got to was, do you use it? How would this, for those people that didn't use the park, would this be impetus for you to go to that park?
I think I would change the order of these questions, but I think that the questions are good. I think that they. Yeah, I guess if we were gonna use them for like a guiding conversation, I would imagine, you can imagine putting them in a different order. But trying to think about like what else. I hear a lot of, I don't know, I hear a lot of people, well, I've already said this. I hear a lot of people being concerned about flooding. They think that the dam does something that it doesn't, they think it's flood control. And it's not, it's a flood risk, not flood control.
And maybe, and if that's one of the things that, is that okay. I wonder what I was gonna say in terms of, do we put that as a question or like a concern, like to address that concern type of thing, like a data, kind of going to your point of like the data bucket?
Mm-hmm.
I think that could definitely be addressed in the upfront presentation.
Yeah.
I know that
Yeah.
I've also encountered this in various places, and yeah, it could also be addressed. I mean, it could be addressed in these meetings, but it could also be addressed in the FAQ on the webpage as well. So that it doesn't. And that's the other part. It's like that has to complement all the other information that's going to be put on the landing page needs to complement this. So some of the things that we can touch on briefly in the meetings, we can provide more information on that with FAQs on the website.
You probably already said this. How's the FAQ getting designed?
Hey, Isla, you want to help me out? Some of those things, the things that are on there now, a lot of that was borrowed information that got set up with by staff, and they pulled information from the Watershed Council. But I think a new set of FAQs, which I am perfectly happy to draft and bring up, and so that doesn't have to be done in the time frame of these meetings so much as that's going to be an ongoing thing. With the project tracker, the FAQs can be updated from the information we get back from these meetings. There's a whole lot of different ways we can present that information and incorporate that. The report will go to the DNR, but also that will feed into the FAQs that we create for the website. And I see that as an ongoing function of this committee as well, is reviewing those and working on those.
I have
I think-
an unrelated question to anything we've been talking about. Throw it out there.
What's that?
Have we invited? I have a question that's not really related, I guess, to other things we've been talking about so much as it is. I'm curious if we've invited trustees from the surrounding townships to the public meetings. Specifically, I'm thinking about the impoundment
Right.
owner, because the township certainly, the taxation questions, it's like the township issue.
They will be. I'll be talking to them tomorrow. In fact, Ken Schwartz has been hard to get a hold of, but yes, that will be the invitation. The invitation, the information goes out to residents and non-residents, and so my job is to pull in the two townships to get them to participate in these meetings as well. So, and when we're flyering and things like that. So the flyering that'll happen for the residents around the dam will go to both the city and the township. So
And that's all being mailed by the city, or do you actually need people to fly? Or
there will be direct mails and there will be flyering. So the direct mails.
I'm part
will
of
go
the
to
part of the Ann Arbor Poster Guild, which means I'm really good at taping posters, usually for concerts to post. But I can do it for also public meetings.
So the direct mailing that Scott was talking about will go to landowners on the impoundment and downstream. The apartments, both north and south of the river, will be flyered. The management companies for those apartments will get the direct mailing. And I'm contacting all of those management companies to coordinate the flyering. So if you want to go flyer, let me know.
I will. Let me know when you want to go.
And staff have been going out and doing these things in the past. So Christopher has been taking one staff person each day and going with him for the flyering that's been done for other meetings and other topics. So.
I'd like to make one additional comment if it's okay. I think it's very positive that the landowners on the impoundment have been invited to speak and to share their concerns. As you know, the vast majority of the landowners on the impoundment are not in the city of Ypsi. They're in the townships. And it was made very clear to them when this was discussed by city council that their concerns and input and so on were not welcome, that they had no stake in the game. This was a city dam and they shouldn't even be there talking about it. So in terms of the feeling that people have, whether they've been heard or not, that has certainly been that's been a factor in that feeling that they haven't been heard.
I mean, I'll just speak from my experience in all the public meetings. I don't think that people who spoke from the township were not heard. So if they had that sentiment given to them in private, but in the public settings, I thought that their voices were very clearly heard, both at the rec center and at the meetings in City Hall.
I guess I'm not familiar with the same meetings that you are, Beth, because I don't know exactly when those took place. If you're talking about, I was talking about the ones just preceding the decision at City Council.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm confused by that too, because I think we listened with open ears. I think that to me, the continued issue is that we just disagree. That's a group that disagrees with the decision. So, I do wonder if this is a group that's ever going to feel heard.
So there, I can appreciate the differences in the perception of those meetings. There was, and I think that has been partially influenced by communications from our previous mayor, and that has also been the case. Sally, you're shaking your head, and it's like you and I had a very different conversation than the conversation that you had with the previous mayor. I know that city staff had communications from the previous mayor that led to a lot of confusion when I started engaging them in conversations as well. So I can appreciate those perceptions, and that there were probably other influences in that contributed to that. So I'm glad that they feel like they're being heard, and that is the purpose of these meetings, is to have those voiced, have those recorded, come up with creative ways to meet those concerns, and instill confidence that the city is paying attention and have heard those things, that I came up with the same list that you have. I didn't share it here tonight, but I spent a good portion of the day going through the meetings that we've had with landowners and different. I keep track of all the public comments in the public meetings that I'm in, and I take extensive notes on this. And so I went through and I re-looked at those, and it came up with a list that was pretty close to this list that's here today. So we do hear you, and I think to some extent that communication was in a turbulent time that a lot of city council didn't feel like they were being heard either. So we'll leave it at that. But I think that perception is there. We've got about 4 minutes left. So if we're good with the list going forward, we can work to have this incorporated for discussion, along with the other things that we've discussed, the list that Summer has provided for, that we just revised for the recreationists. And then we've got another meeting before we go to the general public. And the thing that I keep in mind here is that this is the beginning of conversations, right? It's not really the beginning, but it's the beginning of public conversations that will feed to the engineers. And we plan on having those experts on hand, so that we can have some questions. If there is a question that is the hanging up the discussion, we can have input from people who are knowledgeable about the topics at hand. So if there's no other comments, we're right about at 9:30. Summer, do you have anything else to?
Nope. This is helpful. So thanks. And I know that we're going to be talking about who's going to be presenting. I think that was one of the best other questions, was who was presenting what, and that is going to be flushed out tomorrow in terms of that agenda, who will be presenting the history as well as other updates. And so we'll be able to assign that too.
Okay. If there's nothing further, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
This has been good. Good discussion. I look forward to the discussion next week as well. So have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Bye.